Alright, so welcome back here everybody, and we're ready to go ahead and continue where we left off in the last lesson here, but now we're ready to go ahead and make the rig for our control stem, or what is going to be our main stem here. So let's just go ahead and bring that back here, and we're not going to be using a spline IK system for our main stem. We're just simply going to use a RP solver, which is the rotate plane solver here. So with that selected, let's just go ahead and draw out the IK where we need it. So we'll start here with the second joint, and we just need to go up here and add it to the end joint. So now with our joint selected and our IK system in here, you can see that that's going to move the way that we want. We don't want it to actually work the same way here as the outer stems and the inner stems. We just wanted this to be a little bit different, and I knew that this was going to be an easy part of the rig. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump here to going ahead and actually creating the rig for what is going to be the main parts of our flower, like the petal parts. We're obviously going to be rigging the face here a little bit differently. We're going to be doing that with the face machine, so you will need the face machine for this. We're not going to rig the face right now. We're going to do this a little bit later, or the face a little bit later here. So let's go ahead and start rigging our main parts here. So let's just go ahead and turn off the geometry that we aren't using. Go ahead and just select these IK handles here. And I need to just add these to a layer real quick. Go ahead and select these, and we'll just go ahead and create a new layer. We'll just call this our IK handle hides, and we can simply just go ahead and hide those real quick. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and draw out our spline IKs, and we're also going to need a custom controller here. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring my controller creation tool in, and this creates all the same controllers that this wizard controllers does, but this is just basically a stripped down version where I don't need the actual icons to know what's what here. Okay, so let's go over here to our animation shelf, and we're going to grab our spline IK tool, and we're going to go ahead and draw out our spline IKs. We're not going to draw it from the base joint, we're drawing it from the second joint here all the way to the end. We'll just go ahead and hit G to repeat that command, and we'll just work our way through here, just continually hitting G, selecting that second joint and drawing it all the way out in the joint chain here. So let's just hit G, select your second joint in the chain, hit G, select your second joint, hit G, do that again. Do this again, just a couple more times here, and you can see that this sort of is going to take just a little bit of time to go ahead and get all those in. So we can go ahead now and turn all that off, and you can see where we have everything drawn out here. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring that back. And we just need to go ahead and hide our geometry real quick. Okay, hide our joints. So now you can see where we have all those cluster curves that we're going to be using. So let me just go ahead and select these IKs real quick, and I'm going to add that to our IK handle hide layer, just so that I can concentrate on what I'm doing here. So we'll go ahead and add those in. Go ahead and bring back our geometry so I can just draw our, oops, those are our joints. Bring back our geometry layer so that I can focus on drawing out these curves. So we're going to be using a different style of curve to make sure that we can select everything here. And you can use any shape that you want to go ahead and signify that. But I think for the most part, the cross here is probably going to be our best option. So let's just go ahead and create that, rotate that 90 degrees, and you can see that this is going to come in with no group, so all I have to do is just go ahead and rename this, and I will just call this our CCFP1, which is just going to signify the front pedal one. Okay, go ahead and bring back our joints, and I just know we're actually going to have to draw this out here, so we're probably better off just drawing this in the front view here. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and place this randomly for the first one. Okay, and we'll go ahead and pull this out. Okay, go ahead and turn back off our polygons, and I want to go ahead and select each one of these curves just so I now can draw out our cluster curves here. So the same process as before when we were rigging the inner and the outer stems here. Just select the curve, hit edit curve, selection, cluster curve, and this way it's going to be easier for me to go ahead and place these control curves, because I want to place them primarily right over and on top of what is going to be our clusters. Okay, so first thing I want to go ahead and do is just draw out the rest of our clusters here. So we'll just go in and select our curve and hit G to repeat the last command. Just select the curves, just go all the way around selecting these curves and hitting G to make sure that we place a cluster curve on the rest of these. So go ahead and hit G. Go ahead and just turn off our joints here. Just select the joint, hit G, select the curve, 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 and hit G. And now you can see where we have a rather large amount of clusters. Okay, so now we just need to go in and create the ability of creating the rest of our control curves here. So we just need to go ahead and select this. We'll go ahead and turn back on our polygons here, and we'll just simply do this in our front view here. Okay, go ahead and just turn off our X-ray, and we might actually have to keep the X-ray on so we can see where those clusters are. So with that first one selected here, go ahead and just hit Control D. Go ahead and move that up, and those are probably going to be just a little bit too large, so I'll just go ahead and scale it down a little bit here. Go ahead and select that third one, Control D. Go ahead and duplicate that, just place it at the top. Okay, go ahead and select those three, clear the history, freeze the transformations there. Okay, go ahead and group all of them to signify that we actually have that entire group made. So we'll just hit insert on our keyboard, snap our pivot point to what is going to be the center of the scene here, grab our move tool, hit Control D, jump into our rotate tool, and we're just going to simply rotate these around. Okay, so we just need to grab our insert tool and our pivot point, go ahead and hit Control D, duplicate that over, go ahead and hit Control D, and just keep working our way around, duplicating these, because they all come in pretty much at the same location on the joint chain. So we just need to go ahead and place these properly here. Okay, and I'm just trying to line up where I think they should be. So we'll go ahead and hit Control D again. Go ahead and duplicate over another one. Go ahead and hit Control D, duplicate over another one. Go ahead, hit Control D, duplicate over another one. Go ahead, hit Control D, duplicate over another one. Okay, go ahead, hit Control D, duplicate over another one. Go ahead, hit Control D and duplicate over another one. Go ahead, hit Control D, duplicate over your last one. Okay. And now what I want to do is go ahead and select all of those. So we'll just go ahead and do this in the outliner would probably be okay. but I want to grab them all in one fell swoop, so just have to do this in our side view here. Okay, so we'll select all of those, Shift P to make sure that they all come out of the group, as you can see here, and there's 36 of them. So we'll just go ahead and select those groups that we aren't using. Go ahead and select all of these. Go ahead, freeze the transformations and center the pivots on all of them. And now we just need to go ahead and make the connections here, which are going to be our parent constraint connections. So we'll just go ahead and turn off our polygons, and we'll just go ahead and grab these curves just to make it easier on ourselves so that we don't have to go ahead and worry about selecting those. So we'll just go ahead and add those to the spline IK layer. Okay, now if you want to go ahead and color those, you can, but for right now I'm not going to go ahead and do that, because I'm going to be setting up a different set of controls that are going to be on top of each one of these sort of groups. So let's just go ahead and select our curves, select the cluster, hit F2 on our keyboard to bring up our animation module. Go ahead, parent constraint. Same thing, just hit G, select the curve, select the cluster, hit G. Now you'll notice that I didn't actually go ahead and create any cluster curves or any control curves for the bottom clusters here, and I'm doing that for a reason, and that'll just come in with being able to parent all those pedals to the actual rig, and I'll show you how we're going to go ahead and do that whenever we go to clean up our outliner. So let's just go ahead and work our way through here, just selecting the curve, selecting the cluster, hitting G just to make sure that we have our parent constraints on here. Hit G, hit G, hit G just to make sure that we have our parent constraint here. And you can see that this just takes a little bit of patience and time to go ahead and get all these cluster controls properly parent constrained. It's basically just a lot of selection, and that's okay. And it's basically going to be the same process there for the back as well. And you'll see where it's going to be easier for us to go ahead and create those back curves and those back control curves, because we've already have one group pretty much made, and we can just simply duplicate those over. So we just need to go ahead and finish off making our parent constraints here. And just have a couple more here to go ahead and create. And I'm just selecting the cluster curve, then selecting a cluster and hitting G to make that parent constraint. And you can see where that's a process that probably could be automated, but for the most part I'm fine going ahead and actually doing that manually. Okay, so now that we have everything selected here, we just need to go ahead and test to make sure that these are all going to work properly. So we can just select the entire thing here, which is just going to be like the outer ring for our pedals, and you can see where that's actually going to move fairly well. So let's go ahead and select the inners real quick, just making sure that these are going to move properly. And you always want to test and make sure that this stuff is moving correctly, because if not, then if you go to basically call your rig finished and everything's not working properly, and you're actually not doing your job right. So we just want to make sure that all of this stuff moves correctly. Okay, so let's go ahead here and make sure that these last ones work fine, and I want to make sure that they're all back in the right spot there. So just selecting these innermost ones, just make sure that this is going to move correctly as well, and that looks like it does. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and group everything here. So let's go ahead and create or select all the cluster handles here, all the clusters. We'll go ahead and call this a group. We'll go ahead and group that. We'll call this the clusters front pedals. Okay, and we'll go ahead and grab all those IK handles. So I just want to make sure that I bring them back, so I make sure that I'm actually selecting the right ones here, and that looks good except for what is going to be that first one there. Go ahead and group those, and we will call this the IK handle pedals. Okay, and now we're ready to go ahead and set up our groups for what are going to be our cluster pedals here. So let's just go ahead and turn our IK handles off. Go ahead and select all these clusters. Those are the other clusters. Go ahead and select those clusters, and we'll just add that to the main layer there. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our main control, which is going to be able to control all of this stuff. So we just need to go ahead and create a circle. Okay, and I just want to go ahead and place this properly here. Go ahead and scale it up just to make sure that it's going to sort of encompass everything there. Okay, just have to move this back a little bit, and probably have to scale that out just a touch, just so it's going to basically run through the middle there. And I'm going to go ahead and call this the CC top pedal main global. Go ahead and center our pivot and freeze our transformations there. Go ahead and hit D and duplicate that. Just scale that down so we can place that in the middle. But we probably want a different shape there. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump back a step so that we actually have our history node there, so that I can go ahead and change the shape here to 20, and let's just go ahead and select every other one here. And go ahead and just scale that down, just so that that's going to signify at least the pedal shape. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just Control D here in a second. And I just want to make sure that that's out and basically going to encompass what we want it to encompass there, and make sure that everything's going to line up properly. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and freeze the transformations there. And now we can go ahead and hit Control D, duplicate that down, and we will go ahead and call this the CC FP, which is going to stand for front pedal mid control. Okay, and we just need to rename this main one here CCFP top main global. Okay, go ahead and select that second one, hit Control D, go ahead and scale this in. Okay, and we will call this the, instead of the mid control, we'll call this the base control, which is probably a bad word, because I mean a bad description, because it is the base control, but it's not the base control. The base control would actually be here, but since this part isn't actually going to be moving, all we really need to go ahead and do is just make sure that we sort of rename it right, and at least decently, so that people understand what that is. Okay, just go ahead and select all three of these, and we'll go ahead and freeze the transformations here. So now we're ready to go ahead and set up the easiest way to go ahead and control this. And the reason why I'm doing this, and this is because I want to be able to control all those pedals at once, or be able to go ahead and control those independently. So what I want to go ahead and do now is just go ahead and select all of these outer ones, the main top ones here, and we will go ahead and just make sure that we have them all selected by moving that. Go ahead and hit Control G to group them, and then we'll call this group the CC pedal tips main GRP. Okay, and with that group selected, you can see that that's actually going to still be moving properly, so our constraints are holding up there. So now we're going to go ahead and select these mid controls. Okay, go ahead and group those, center the pivot there, and we will call this the CC pedals mid global, and you can see where that's all going to move correctly. Okay, and we will just go ahead and select all the rest of those in the outliner there. Okay, go ahead and hit Control G to group that, center the pivot and freeze the transformation there. Go ahead and call that the CC bass, CC pedal bass GRP main. Okay, so now when we are going to be able to set up our parent constraints for this, we can go ahead and have an easy way of selecting the groups so that it's all going to move properly, and it's going to be easier for us to go ahead and set that up. So now I'm ready to go ahead and change the color of these here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab my color control, select the group that I want. So for the top here, we'll just go ahead and make that yellow. Okay, for the mid one, we'll go ahead and make that blue. Probably not. Maybe make that green, and make the innermost one like purple or pink here, just to try and signify to the animator what's what there. So we'll go ahead and select these three main curves, and we'll go ahead and turn that green, just so that there's at least a, well, that middle one should probably go ahead and change a different color then too, because I don't want to try and keep the outer portion green and the inner portion green. So go ahead and just select that mid group. We'll just go ahead and turn that blue. Okay, so now we have a decent contrast there between our front pedals and our back pedals. And I think that's it for this lesson. So we'll go ahead and come back in the next lesson and continue working on what is going to be our back pedals here. We're basically just going to use the same process that we did for our front pedals, and we're going to go ahead and do that for our back pedals, but we'll go ahead and do that in the next lesson. So let's just take a final look at our outliner before we call this into our lesson here. And you can still see where everything is still pretty much lined up here, and these curves are going to go with our spline IK curves there. Okay, but everything for the most part is pretty much lined up and correctly placed. So let's just go ahead and do that, and there you go. So yeah, come on back in the next lesson and we'll continue working.